It's been almost 3 years since I released my first YouTube video where I built this custom biome with purple trees, a temple, bridges that lead to nowhere, and the rune of nature in the center of everything. Now, after all these years of building, I feel curious about how different I could do this build, and how much my skills have improved. Today, we are transforming the rune of nature into something way more epic, so let's jump into it. Let's begin by creating a new world and make it large biomes, so we have more room to work with. Ideally, I would like it to be on some plains biomes, so the first thing would be to look for that, just because those are easier to build on. Okay, that's actually pretty lucky, I swear I didn't plan this, but anyways, let's fly around a little bit to find the perfect area to build. I decided that this time the build had to be included in a regular world, which would be slightly harder since we would need to blend the edges of the custom biome to the plains, but if done correctly I think it's going to look even more epic in the end. This area looks perfect, but before doing anything, let's create a small to-do list board with all the things that I would like to have in this build. Alright, we have a simple board now where we have written exactly what we need to do. Find the perfect plains to build, which we have already done, so we can mark that one out with green. There are a lot of other things, and even room for one more if needed. But now we have to create the landscape. Let's go ahead and open Axiom, and before doing anything crazy, let's clean the area a bit. We don't want any trees around or grass, so I'm just going to get rid of those with a box selection and using the replace function. Now we can use the elevation tool and some custom height maps to start building some mountains around these plains. The idea is to turn this into a valley of some sort, because this is supposed to be like a secret land, and the main barrier between that and the regular world will be the mountains. Getting the right shape for the mountains took some time, mostly because I had no idea of which exact shapes I wanted. In any case, it's always fun to use the height maps and see what we can come up with. Later on, I had to come back to them and tweak them a few times to get mountains that I actually liked. But for the time being, these ones with some extra smoothing and a few flat platforms serve the purpose of giving me a rough idea and a frame for the land that I had to work with. As for the colors, I went with the same color palette that I had in my old build, warped blocks for the mountains and warped nylium for the flat areas. I added a few rocks on top of each mountains as you can see, which look awful. But I trust I can fix that with colors and some smoothing maybe in the future. For now, I just want to create some paths leading up using the slope tool, which is very cool to create this kind of smooth walkways leading up into the hills on the side. Since I don't really like the edges of the warped nylium, I think what I'm going to do is replace everything with warped warp blocks and carefully just paint the center of the flat areas with the nylium. So we get to see only the top side of the block and not the netherrack. I finished the landscaping part by adding some more mountains in the back. I fixed the stone boulders on top as much as I could. Using the slope, I blended the high mountains with the outside terrain. And finally, I chose a gradient that goes from warp blocks to dirt to blend the cyan colors of this custom biome to the outside plains, just to have a smoother transition between them. So this is the final result of all that. I still need to decide on a few colors for the top of the mountains, but that's a problem for a future Calven. For now, I can take the create landscape from our to-do list board and blend the biome as well. So now, we are going to transform the rune, and make it big of course. It might be the nostalgia, but this remains to be one of my favorite builds. There are many things I would do differently now, but I really like the structures and the overall feel of the biome. And there's a parrot, I don't remember this guy, hello! Anyways, let's steal the rune from here and bring it over to the new world so that we can transform it. So this is how the old rune would look in the current new landscape. Not bad, but I think I can go bigger. So let's go further away for this. I really like the shape, so I'm going to try to stick to that while making it bigger. For that, let's start with the platform where we can actually build. And then I'm going to use the rock tool in Axiom until I get a rough shape that resembles a curving rock leaning to the right. Smooth it out a bit. And carve a hole in this side with the melt tool. And I think, yeah, that's a good start. With some extra hand tweaking, I think we can fix certain awkward spots and maybe give it a bit more of character. It's bigger, but not super huge, and I think I like that. It should fit in with no problem. Now I will use one of the newest Axiom additions, which is the one right here, the shape tool. We can choose from here an Archimedes spiral. Let's rotate it and play around with the parameters like the diameter and number of loops until we get a spiral that we like. That's good, I think I like that. Now we just need to stack it into the rune. delete it, and just like that we have the rune carving. Now let's rotate the entire thing and use world edit to fill in the bottom with the classic foggy glass trick that we all know and love. Lava first, and I'm thinking magenta and purple mostly. I might change it to green later on, I'm not sure. That's a mistake. Okay, I gotta close this with temporary blocks first. We now fill again, and I think we can break a bit of this so it's not super flat. There we go, now we can rotate it back to its original position and start painting it. For the painting part, I used the techniques that I explained in my coloring tutorial video, which basically consists in shading with different colors of wool first and then replace them with the actual blocks that you want. If you are interested in that and want to know in more details, the link to that video is right here. So after using that technique and after a lot of hand tweaking, I arrived at this look for the rune. Okay, it looks good enough, so let's move to the next thing on the list, purple trees. So hear me out. This is what I envision for this part. 3 giant trees distributed around the different entrances to the biome, so any adventurer that comes in with bad intentions shall suffer the consequences. In terms of shape, I want the 3 of them to feel different from each other. So for the first one, I'm thinking of a tree that looks kinda rigid, so I'm going to use the path tool to create the trunk and the branches with mostly sharp angles. Now I will use the shape tool again, but this time with a metaball modifier, and use different solid shapes to create the leaves. I really like the smooth and organic feel that this tool creates for the leaves. Now for the color of them, I'm thinking about mixing purple blocks and amethysts, and then to act as hanging vines, I will use a mix of coral blocks. They are very vibrant, so I really like how they look in here. Now for the second protector tree, I think it should be around here, guarding this river entrance, but for that I'm thinking we'd need it to be in a horizontal position, which might be a bit tricky. This one took a lot of time to get the branches right and then the leaves, and here I used a slightly different approach than before to get a unique and separate look from the other one. Also, I like how in the end the curving branches and the orientation gave this second protector a feel of being alive and in movement, which completely differentiates it from the other more rigid one. We need to build the third tree, but there's a problem. I have no idea what to do. I kinda ran out of inspiration. So I will do what I always do when I don't know what to do. Procrastinate! Nah, I'm just joking. While I wait for the inspiration to hit me, I'm going to take a look at what comes next. Back in the old Rune, we had this lonely sort of temple here and the 2 bridges. I love the style that I used for all of this. I wouldn't change too much of that, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, where do these bridges go? What is their purpose? And why is this temple or house all alone in here? So let's grab all these buildings and bring them over to the new world. With that as reference for the style, I'm going to start planning a sort of city. As always, I use red wool for the frame of the buildings to see where things would go first. And since I want all the structures to preserve a similar style, I couldn't be very creative with the shapes and had to stick with rectangles most of the times. The craziest I could do was to put them in a diagonal. I know, very crazy. Woo, fireball, if you know, you know. Before building the houses, there's something that I want to try, and that's the new auto shade function from Axiom, which, as the name suggests, is used to shade the builds automatically with just one click. So let's try it out on the Rune, shall we? Let's use world edit first to change all the blocks back to stone first. Now we can select them, and up here under operations we find auto shade. In this menu we select a sun orientation, or we can do it relative to the player positioning, and there are a lot of other options as well. It's just insane. So let's choose this angle from where I'm standing now and hit the button, and it's shaded. That's very cool and easy. I feel it's a bit too dark though, so let's try a few more times, but first I will change the base block to something brighter like calcite. We hit again from the same angle and let's see. Ooh, I actually really like that. I might change a few details by hand in the future, but it's a very solid look to start with. Now we need to spend some time building the houses. Luckily the style is already mostly decided for us. In case you were wondering, the inspiration for this style of builds back then came from a video done by the Varuna build team called Agnoia Frieden. I don't know if that's how to pronounce it, but it's such a cool build, one of my favorites out there. I adapted it to what I could do back then, and now I'm adapting my own adaptation to this new build and scale. So even though it didn't end up looking the same, I think the vibe is still there. Alright, the houses are done, and the inspiration for the third tree has not come yet. So let's move to the next step, which is to transform the bridges. And the mushrooms as well, because I forgot. I said it before, but I want the bridges to serve a purpose, so I'm thinking I'm going to make them up high, connecting the different mountain tops on the back. So if we decide to make structures there, we can walk up to them. And as always, I think I'm going to plan this with orange wool to get a better idea first. So here we have already marked out the places where I want the bridges to go. We have this one in a diagonal and these two just simple straight lines. I might add a few more, but right now I just want to get the design settled down. Being honest, I really like the bridge designs we had in the old Rune, so I just went for something very similar with a few minor differences. The main one I would say is the colors used for the shading. For the other bridges that are not in a diagonal, I went for a slightly different design. It follows sort of the same lines, but in the end I think that the patterns of the arches looked better being different. Then I just copied the diagonal one and used it to connect the mountains at the back, and extended the pillars a bit down using a second platform. I was afraid that the size of those bridges could make everything look small, but now that I see it from down here, I think it all looks bigger and way more epic. I designed a set of mushrooms off camera following the techniques that I showcased in my latest tutorial, where I also explained step by step how I did the trees for this mega build and a dragon as well. So if you are interested in all that, I will put a link somewhere around here. But coming back to the build, I think that the mushrooms added a nice extra pop of color that was very much needed with all the greys and whites that we added lately. So with that, we can mark these two off our board. Now it was time to work on the different entrances to the biome, so for that I made a simpler bridge that connects the outside land passing right under the first tree guardian. I made it look a bit ruined to give that feel of an ancient abandoned place, and the shading and mossy blocks helped a lot with that. If you've come this far and like what you see, please consider liking the video and subscribing, that would really help the channel. That's all, thank you, let's continue. While working on this part of the map, the inspiration for the third tree finally came along. And actually, a tree I saw in real life helped a lot with that. The tree I came across looked like it had been chopped down to a tree stump, but it had relentlessly grown back with branches coming out all around the stump. I thought that was very cool, so I tried to bring that to this build. Of course I took some creative liberties for the branches and made them look like tentacles, which in the end I think made this last tree guardian look the most alien-like. Under this last guardian I built an entrance, or more likely a path that goes right under this giant curling branch. With that done and out of my brain, I took the time to design a bigger structure for the top of the mountains. I followed the same process as for the houses down below and a very similar style. And with that, we can finally cross the trees out of our board and the big structures too. So now we are just left with these two things. So let's quickly do that. Every other area is looking pretty much complete. We even have a third entrance bridge back here, but this front side requires some love. And as we said, some ponds and vegetation might do the trick. So let's start by carving a hole. A big one over here, let's smooth it out a bit. And here we can put a smaller one. That netherrack on the edges is ugly, so let's change that. And I think we can paint the edges with some brighter colors that can look very cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. Now let's fill this in with the water and use a noise painter to put some flowers floating on the surface. Something like that. And on top of all that, we can play with the biome painter to bring some variation to the color of the water. Always love to do that when I have the chance.